It's a short story, but a special one. So I was born in London, and at the age of 10, my father sent me to boarding school in Nigeria. So obviously, as you can imagine, it was very difficult at the age of 10. So the first 2 years were difficult, but spent 5 years in boarding school in Nigeria, and by the time I got to the end of it, it was absolutely great, smashing. And that gave me sort of a grounding and a relationship with Africa, but more importantly, I made a lot of lifelong friends. So when I started my business after sort of business school and working in London, started my business in London as well, I thought the time was right to sort of take it to Africa in 2003, 2004. I had a lot of friends, I had a great connection, I'd been visiting, and there was a lot of opportunity, I thought, in Africa.
So what type of opportunity did you see in the property sector?
So in terms of the opportunity property sector, so the property is driven by people, and everybody's heard the stories about the demographic dividend, the number of people in Africa, the number of the youth that's growing. I understand that 450 millennial in Africa is the second largest continent for the millennials. So the opportunity comes with certain challenges, of course, because there are challenges of infrastructure, there's challenges of insufficient buildings, and being in real estate, obviously real estate is the platform that people need to live, work, play, recreation. So it's a world of opportunity.
So the theme of the conference is the life of Re. How are you living that out in your business?
So a number of things. Obviously, we reinvent our business almost every other quarter, if you like. As you know, property is about timing, and the cycles of property change very often. And I think it's important to get into the right cycles to do well in property. But it's also a business. So I do for work what most people do for pleasure, and most people do as a hobby, because almost everybody's a property developer, DIY property developer. So there's something someone said once. There's no such thing as bad property. There's just bad timing. So in terms of what do I take away from this sort of theme, the re-theme is, reinvent, reinvigorate, recreate, and just try to do things that stay at the top of the cycle.
So where do we see the property market going in the next 5 years in terms of your own business? What are your plans?
So we developed the theme of mixed-use property. So mostly it's commercial, retail, recreational, leisure, lifestyle development. And Africa is a destination that a lot of that hasn't quite been done in most parts of Africa. South Africa probably the exception. But we do most of our developments in West Africa. So the opportunities for us basically are in that whole mixed-use environment, providing a platform to change the way people live, work and play.
So where do you plan to expand to next?
So we've done West Africa, and we had a serviced office business which was across Africa in the north, the east, the west and the south. So we'll follow that trend. We saw that business 3 years ago. So from our real estate development business, it's East Africa next, South Africa after that, and then perhaps North Africa.
Are we going to see you move into East Africa this year?
I wouldn't say this year, probably early parts of next year. We have great experience there. We have a foothold there. We have an office there, but we're not doing any real developments there yet. So we would like to see East Africa sort of within the first quarter of next year.
And what would you say is the secret of your success?
Well, success is a journey, it's not a destination, so I wouldn't be proud enough to say, or arrogant enough to say that we're successful. But I would say the secret basically is just make sure you hire people who are more intelligent than yourself, make sure you take care of the people that take care of the business, and try to stay on the cutting edge of what people do and what people think about, and prepare property for people and not for yourself.
What do you think the challenges are in Nigeria?
Challenges in Nigeria, gosh, many. So in property terms, there's sort of the land issues, there's the access to long-term finance is an issue, infrastructure is fairly weak, so the infrastructure issues, and property needs a platform of good infrastructure and good sort of legislation and open government. So some of those things are still challenging at a point in time, getting better, but not quite there. The challenge of leadership, again, getting better, but not quite there as well. The regulatory environment is still very tough, getting better, but not quite there. So those I would say are the main challenges.
So what do you think needs to change in the legislation to see more ownership of property in Nigeria?
Three things. Transparency, just make it cheaper and easier for property developers to develop property at an affordable cost so people can afford. to long-term finance, so government-backed long-term finance. There's no mortgage, there's no realistic mortgage system in Nigeria. And if there was a mortgage system, I think it will unleash the property markets quite significantly. I was told once there's a $15 trillion mortgage business there, sitting in just one or two of the biggest states in Nigeria, in Lagos State, for instance. So I think unleashing long-term finance, creating a mortgage system will certainly help property. And the third thing is infrastructure. I think if the government focused on finding ways to provide infrastructure, so power, IT, roads, water, utilities, that sort of thing, then it would make it a lot easier to develop property at lesser cost. I would say currently in Nigeria, probably 30 to 40% of the cost that goes into both creating the property and managing the property are things that you would have expected to be provided by the municipal authority or the city authority.
Have you spoken to government at all?
Yes, we relate to the government, we have conferences, we have sessions, we speak to them privately and publicly, but I suppose it's about priorities, as they say. My mom always used to tell me, so when you have limited resources, you choose your priorities. So I guess the government chooses priorities. It just so happens that real estate at this point in time is fighting a hard battle to get into that priority list.
And are you also in Ghana?
It's a great market. It's a lot smaller than Nigeria, as you can imagine, but a good market, a bit easier on the regulatory environment, a bit easier in terms of actually creating your property, but difficult because there are not enough people and there's not enough sort of substantial money to access the sort of property that we've been developing.